I watched his hands move across the stage, precise, controlled, mesmerizing. Every gesture drew me deeper into the performance, but it wasn't the play that held my attention. It was him. The way he commanded the space, the quiet intensity in his voice, the subtle glance he cast toward the audience that seemed meant only for me. When the curtain fell and the applause faded, I knew I couldn't just walk away. Frank would be working late again, buried in spreadsheets and conference calls. I had the whole evening ahead of me, and suddenly, the idea of going home to an empty house felt impossible. Did you like the beginning? Like it, subscribe, write in the comments what got you. I lingered in the lobby as the crowd thinned, my pulse quickening with each passing minute. The theater's ornate walls seemed to pulse with residual energy from the performance, and I found myself drawn toward the side door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." My heels clicked softly against the marble floor as I approached, heart hammering with anticipation and nervous excitement. Looking for someone? The voice made me turn, and there he was, Lyle, still in his stage costume, but the theatrical makeup had been wiped away, revealing sharp cheekbones and eyes that seemed to see right through me. I paused, suddenly aware of how this must look. A married woman, lingering backstage, chasing after an actor she'd never met. I wanted to tell you how incredible your performance was tonight. He stepped closer, and I caught the faint scent of stage lights and something distinctly masculine. Just my performance? His voice carried the same quiet intensity I'd noticed on stage, but now it was directed entirely at me. The question hung between us, loaded with possibility. I should have made an excuse, thanked him politely, and walked back to my car. Instead, I found myself stepping closer, drawn by something I couldn't name but desperately wanted to explore. The whole production was remarkable, I said, though we both knew that wasn't what I meant. Lyle smiled, a slow curve of his lips that made something deep inside me flutter. Would you like to see the theater from backstage? It's quite different, from this angle. I nodded before I could think better of it, following him through a maze of corridors lined with costume racks and prop tables. The scent of old wood and fabric filled the air, mixing with the lingering warmth from the stage lights. He moved with the same grace I'd admired during the performance, and I found myself studying the way his shoulders moved beneath his shirt, the confident set of his posture. "What's your name?" he asked as we walked, his voice echoing softly in the narrow hallway. "Erica," I replied, surprised by how breathless I sounded. "Erica." He repeated it like he was testing the way it felt on his tongue. "Beautiful name. Are you here alone tonight?" The question should have reminded me of Frank, of the ring on my finger, of all the reasons this was dangerous. Instead, it sent a thrill through me. "Yes," I said simply. We emerged onto the stage, empty now except for the ghost light casting long shadows across the boards. The theater stretched out before us, rows of empty seats creating an intimate amphitheater just for us. Lyle turned to face me, and in the dim light, his features seemed both familiar and mysterious. "This is where the magic happens," he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Where we become someone else entirely. Is that what you're doing now?" I asked, stepping closer. "Being someone else?" His eyes searched mine for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "For the first time all evening, I'm being completely myself." The admission hung between us, charged with possibility. I could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. When he reached up to brush a strand of hair from my face, his touch sent shivers down my spine. "You're married," he observed, his fingers grazing the ring on my left hand. "Yes," I whispered, but I didn't pull away. "Happily?" The question cut deeper than I expected. Frank and I had been together for 15 years, comfortable in our routines, our separate lives running parallel but rarely intersecting. When had we stopped really seeing each other? When had comfortable become empty? "I thought so," I said honestly. "Until tonight." Lyle's thumb traced across my knuckles, a feather-light touch that seemed to ignite every nerve ending. "What changed? Tonight?" "You," I breathed, the admission escaping before I could stop it. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel his warmth, could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "Erica," he murmured, my name a soft caress on his lips. "This is crazy," I whispered, even as my body leaned toward his. "Sometimes the best things are," he replied, his hand moving to cup my cheek. When his lips met mine, it was like coming alive, after years of sleepwalking. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, giving me a chance to pull away. Instead, I melted into him, my hands finding the solid warmth of his chest. He deepened the kiss, and I could taste the lingering mint from whatever he'd had between acts, could feel the slight roughness of his jaw against my skin. My body responded with an intensity that surprised me, a deep ache spreading through my core as his hands found my waist, pulling me closer. I could feel the strength in his arms, the way his body seemed to surround me completely. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. "We should go somewhere more private," he murmured against my ear, his breath sending fresh waves of desire through me. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He took my hand, leading me deeper into the theater's maze of corridors until we reached a small rehearsal room. The space was intimate, lined with mirrors and containing only a piano and a few chairs. Lyle closed the door behind us, and suddenly, we were completely alone. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his hands resting lightly on my shoulders. In response, I reached up and began unbuttoning his shirt, my fingers trembling slightly with anticipation. His skin was warm beneath the fabric, muscles shifting as he breathed. When I pressed my palms flat against his chest, I could feel his heart racing, matching the frantic rhythm of my own. He groaned softly, his hands finding the zipper at the back of my dress. The sound of it sliding down seemed impossibly loud, in the quiet room, followed by the whisper of fabric as the dress pooled at my feet. His eyes roamed over me, appreciation clear in his gaze, and I felt beautiful in a way I hadn't in years. "You're incredible," he breathed, his hands skimming along my sides, leaving trails of fire in their wake. I pressed closer, needing to feel more of him, needing to chase away the emptiness that had been growing inside me for so long. His lips found my neck, trailing kisses along the sensitive skin, and I arched against him, a soft sound escaping my lips. He lifted me easily, setting me on the edge of the piano, the cool wood a stark contrast to the heat building between us. His hands traced patterns on my thighs, slowly working their way higher, and I could feel my body responding, becoming ready for him in ways that made me dizzy with want. "Tell me what you need," he whispered, his voice rough with desire. I gasped, the word torn from somewhere deep inside me. "I need you." He positioned himself between my legs, his hands gripping my hips as he pressed closer. When he entered me, slow and deliberate, I cried out softly, overwhelmed by the sensation of being filled so completely. He stilled for a moment, letting me adjust, his eyes searching mine. "Okay?" he asked, and the tenderness in his voice made my chest tight. I nodded, wrapping my legs around his waist, pulling him deeper. He began to move then, setting a rhythm that was both gentle and intense, each thrust sending waves of pleasure through my body. I clung to his shoulders, lost in the sensation, in the way he seemed to know exactly how to touch me, how to make me feel alive again. The mirrors around us reflected our joined bodies, creating an infinity of intimate moments, and I found myself watching our reflection, fascinated by the way we moved together. Lyle's eyes followed my gaze, and when he saw what I was looking at, he groaned. "Beautiful," he murmured, his pace increasing slightly. "So beautiful." I could feel the tension building inside me, a coiling heat that seemed to start in my core and spread outward. My breathing became ragged, small sounds escaping my lips with each movement. Lyle's hands roamed my body, finding sensitive spots I'd forgotten I had, touching me in ways that made me arch and gasp. "Let go," he whispered against my ear. "Let go for me." His words, combined with the perfect angle of his movement, sent me over the edge. Pleasure crashed through me in waves, my body tightening around him as I cried out his name. He followed. Moments later, his own release powerful and consuming, his face buried in my neck as he shuddered against me. For long moments, we stayed like that, breathing hard, bodies still joined, hearts slowly returning to normal. When he finally pulled back to look at me, his expression was soft, almost wondering. "That was," he began, then shook his head. "I don't have words." "Neither do I whispered, my hands still tangled in his hair. He helped me down from the piano, both of us moving slowly, reluctantly returning to reality. As we dressed, stealing glances at each other, the weight of what we'd done began to settle over me. I was married. I'd just been intimate with a stranger in a theater rehearsal room. I should have felt guilty, ashamed, but all I could think about was how alive I felt, how completely present I'd been for the first time in years. "I should go," I said finally, though every part of me wanted to stay. Lyle nodded, but he caught my hand as I reached for the door. "Will I see you again?" The question hung between us, heavy with possibility and complication. "I don't know," I said honestly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper, pressing it into my palm. "My number," he said simply, "in case you decide you want to find out what this could be." I looked down at the paper, then back at his face. "Lyle, no pressure," he said quickly. "But Erica, what we just shared, that was real. Don't let anyone tell you it wasn't." I nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in my throat. He walked me back through the theater, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back, a touch that seemed to burn through the fabric of my dress. At the stage door, he stopped. "Thank you," he said, "for seeing me. Really seeing me." Thank you, I whispered back, for helping me remember who I am. He leaned down and kissed me one more time, soft and lingering, before opening the door. The cool Boston air hit my face as I stepped outside, and I turned back once to see him silhouetted in the doorway, watching me go. The drive home passed in a blur. My body still hummed with the memory of his touch, and I could smell his scent on my skin. By the time I pulled into my driveway, Frank's car was already there, the kitchen light glowing yellow through the windows. I sat in my car for a moment, staring at my house, at the life I'd built with Frank. It looked the same as it had when I'd left a few hours ago, but everything felt different now. I felt different. Frank was in the kitchen when I walked in, loosening his tie, a glass of scotch in his hand. He looked up when I entered, and for a moment I was terrified that he would somehow know that my evening would be written across my face. "How was the play?" he asked, the same polite question he always asked about my cultural outings. "It was transformative," I said, the word carrying more weight than he could possibly know. He nodded absently, already turning back to his phone. "Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm going to finish up some work in the study." And just like that, he was gone, disappearing into his separate world, leaving me standing in our kitchen with the taste of another man still on my lips. I touched the piece of paper in my purse, Lyle's number burning like a secret against my fingers. That night, I lay in bed next to Frank, listening to his steady breathing, my mind replaying every moment of the evening. The way Lyle had looked at me, really looked at me, seeing something in me that I'd forgotten existed. The way his hands had felt on my skin, reverent and hungry at the same time. The way he'd made me feel beautiful, desired, alive. I knew I should throw away his number, should pretend tonight had never happened, should go back to the comfortable emptiness of my marriage. But as I closed my eyes, all I could think about was the way he'd whispered my name, the way he'd made me remember what it felt like to be truly wanted. The next morning, Frank left early for a breakfast meeting, barely pausing to kiss my cheek, before rushing out the door. I sat at our kitchen table staring at my coffee, Lyle's number burning a hole in my purse. I'd pulled it out a dozen times, running my fingers over his handwriting, remembering the way those same fingers had traced patterns on my skin. My phone buzzed with a text from Frank. "Client dinner tonight. Don't wait up." I stared at the message, feeling something shift inside me. How many nights had I waited up anyway, only to have him come home distracted, distant, more interested in his email than in me? How many dinners had I eaten alone? How many conversations had I tried to start only to have them die in the face of his distraction? Before I could lose my nerve, I pulled out Lyle's number and typed a message. "Thank you for last night. I can't stop thinking about it." My finger hovered over the send button for a long moment before I pressed it, my heart racing as the message disappeared into the digital ether. Almost immediately, my phone buzzed with a response. "I was hoping I'd hear from you." I haven't been able to focus on anything else. A smile tugged at my lips, the first genuine smile I'd felt in weeks. We exchanged a few more messages, careful and tentative at first, then gradually becoming more open, more honest about what we were feeling. "Would you like to have coffee?" he asked finally. "Somewhere public, no pressure, I just want to see you again." I stared at the message for a long time, knowing that meeting him again would be crossing another line, taking another step away from the safe, empty life I'd built with Frank. But the alternative, going back to pretending that last night hadn't changed everything, felt impossible. "Yes," I typed back. "I'd like that very much." We arranged to meet at a small cafe in Cambridge, far enough from my usual haunts that I was unlikely to run into anyone I knew. I spent longer than usual getting ready, choosing a dress that made me feel confident, applying makeup with more care than I had in months. When I walked into the cafe, Lyle was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. He stood when he saw me, and the smile that spread across his face made my knees weak. "You came," he said, as if he hadn't quite believed I would. "I said I would," I replied, settling into the chair across from him. "How are you feeling about last night?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. "Any regrets?" I considered the question seriously, waiting for the guilt or shame to surface. Instead, all I felt was a warm glow, a sense of rightness that I hadn't experienced in years. "No regrets," I said finally. "What about you?" "None," he said without hesitation. "Although, I'll admit, I'm not entirely sure what we're doing here." "Neither am I admitted. But I know I don't want it to end." We talked for hours, the conversation flowing as easily as if we'd known each other for years. He told me about his life, his dreams, his struggles as an actor in a competitive city. I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't in years, sharing thoughts and feelings I'd kept locked away even from Frank. "Your husband," Lyle said eventually, his voice careful. "Are you planning to tell him?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Frank. My marriage. The life I was potentially throwing away for a man I'd known for less than 24 hours. I don't know, I said honestly. Everything feels so complicated right now. Lyle reached across the table, covering my hand with his. I don't want to be the reason your life falls apart, Erica. But I also can't pretend that what's happening between us isn't real. It is real, I said, turning my hand so our palms touched. That's what scares me. He was quiet for a moment, his thumb tracing circles on my wrist. What if we took this slow, figured out what we mean to each other before we make any big decisions? Nodded, relief flooding through me. I'd like that. Good, he said, raising our joined hands to press a soft kiss to my knuckles, because I'm not ready to let you go. Over the next few weeks, we fell into a careful dance. We met for coffee, for walks along the Charles River, for long conversations in quiet corners of bookstores. Lyle was patient, never pushing for more than I was ready to give, but the attraction between us continued to simmer just beneath the surface. At home, Frank remained oblivious, wrapped up in his work and his routines. Our conversations grew even, more stilted if that was possible, and I found myself counting the hours until I could see Lyle again. You seem different lately, Frank said one evening, glancing up from his laptop. Happier. Do I? I asked, my heart racing. Had he noticed something? Was he suspicious? Yeah, it's nice. Maybe that art appreciation class you're taking is good for you. I told him I was taking an evening class to explain my absences, and he'd accepted it without question, just as he accepted most things about my life with polite disinterest. It is, I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. Lyle was teaching me to appreciate many things I'd forgotten about myself. 3 weeks after our first meeting, Lyle invited me to his apartment. We'd been careful to keep our meetings public, both of us knowing that being alone together again would inevitably lead to more than conversation. But the pull between us had become impossible to ignore. Are you sure? He asked when I accepted his invitation. Once we cross this line again, I'm sure, I said, though my heart was pounding with nerves and anticipation. His apartment was small but beautiful, filled with books and artwork, warm and lived in a way my house with Frank had never been. When he closed the door behind us, the air immediately felt charged with possibility. Would you like some wine? He asked, but we both knew that wasn't why I was there. Later, I said, stepping closer to him. This time there was no hesitation, no careful exploration. We came together with an urgency born of weeks of restraint, our hands seeking, claiming, remembering. He lifted me against the wall, and I wrapped my legs around his waist, both of us already breathing hard. I've missed you, he groaned against my neck. Missed touching you. Show me, I whispered, and he did. He carried me to his bedroom, laying me down on sheets that smelled like him, like home in a way that felt both foreign and completely right. This time we took our time, exploring each other with a thoroughness that left us both gasping and shaking. Afterward, we lay tangled together, my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. The contentment I felt was so complete, so different from anything I'd experienced with Frank, that it was almost overwhelming. Erica, Lyle said softly, his fingers combing through my hair. I think I'm falling in love with you. The words hit me like a physical blow, not because they were unwelcome, but because they made everything real in a way that terrified me. Lyle, I began, but he pressed a finger to my lips. You don't have to say anything, he said. I just needed you to know. But the truth was, I was falling in love with him too. Had been since that first night in the theater. Maybe since the first moment I'd seen him on stage. The realization should have sent me running back to the safety of my marriage, but instead, it only made me want to sink deeper into whatever this was between us. I need to tell Frank, I said suddenly, the words surprising us both. Lyle's hand stilled in my hair. Are you sure? No, I admitted, but I can't keep living this double life. It's not fair to any of us. He was quiet for a long moment. What will you tell him? The truth, I said, though the idea terrified me. That I've been unhappy for years. That I've found someone who makes me remember who I used to be. And if he wants to fight for your marriage? I considered the question seriously. Frank and I had been together for 15 years. We had a house, shared friends, a life that looked perfect from the outside. But when I tried to imagine choosing that life over what I'd found with Lyle, I couldn't do it. Then we'll see, I said finally. But Lyle, I can't go back to the way things were. Not now that I know what this feels like. He pulled me closer, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together. I left his apartment that night with a sense of resolution I hadn't felt in years. Tomorrow, I would talk to Frank. Tomorrow, I would start the difficult process of untangling a life that no longer fit. Tonight, I would hold on to the feeling of being truly, completely loved. The conversation with Frank went better and worse than I'd expected. He was hurt, confused, angry, all the things I'd anticipated. But he was also relieved, admitting that he'd felt the distance between us too, that he'd been wondering if we were staying together out of habit rather than love. "Do you love him?" he asked, and I could see the pain in his eyes. "Yes," I said simply. There was no point in lying. He nodded slowly. "Then I guess we both know what needs to happen." The divorce proceedings were amicable, if emotionally exhausting. Frank moved out first, taking a corporate apartment downtown. I stayed in the house initially, but everything about it felt wrong, now filled with the ghost of a life that had never really suited me. 6 months later, I moved in with Lyle. His small apartment became our small apartment, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was home. We talked about the future, cautiously, at first, then with growing confidence. He auditioned for a role in New York, and when he got it, I didn't hesitate to follow. "Are you sure?" he asked, as we packed our lives into boxes. "Leaving everything behind for a man you've known less than a year?" "I'm not leaving everything behind," I said, wrapping my arms around his neck. "I'm taking everything that matters with me." Now, 2 years later, I watch him prepare for another performance. The same focused intensity I fell in love with still evident in every movement. Sometimes I think about that night in the theater, about the woman I was then, lonely, lost, sleepwalking, through a life that never fit. I barely recognize her now. "Ready?" Lyle asks, straightening his costume one final time. "Always," I reply, the same answer I've given him every night for the past 2 years. He kisses me, quick and sure, before heading for the stage. I settle into my usual seat in the front row, still feeling that same thrill I felt the first night I watched him perform. After the show, we'll go home together. We'll share a late dinner and talk about our days. We'll fall asleep tangled together in sheets that smell like both of us. It's a simple life, but it's ours. And every night, when I watch him become someone else on stage, I remember that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is become who you're meant to be. Have you ever had a moment that changed everything? A single decision that led you away from safety and toward something real? What would you have done if you were in my place that night in the theater? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your stories. And before you go, don't forget to like this video and hit subscribe. Life's too short for anything less than extraordinary. Thanks for being here. See you in the next one.